Graham Linehan seems to have had a road to Damascus moment in terms of cancel culture, mainly because he himself was ousted from things like Father Ted the Musical. He lost his wife, he lost his comedy career for simply speaking up on the trans issue. He's currently been doing a circuit of particularly GB News interviews, and it's interesting to see his place in the cultural dialogue, shall we say, particularly hot off the heels after the roast of Count Dankula, where he made a guest appearance.
He did. For anyone who's wondering, Graham Linehan is what is commonly known in various circles as a TERF.
Yes.
As in, he believes that being a woman has some biological component, which makes him pretty normal, actually, when it comes to the analysis of what a woman is.
Yes. Well, we'll examine the philosophical distinctions between the TERFs and the transgender movement later, I think, because these are both sides that neither of us agree with, but it's fun to watch them fight. Speaking of people fighting, particularly with themselves, you can go over and subscribe to lotuseaters.com to understand another trans phenomenon. That's trans speciesism. Josh inflicted Harry to understanding people that want to turn themselves into cats and lizards.
Josh being he's got a master's in psychology.
Yes.
So he's actually very well equipped to deal with this kind of phenomenon. I haven't actually watched this yet, but I will do after this, because this is, I mean, look at that. Look at the state of it. What drives someone to be like that?
Well, clearly some form of mental illness, but
Obviously.
Josh actually makes the point in it, and when we were researching it in the office, he said it's strange how there is no willingness to do research into this phenomenon.
Really?
So this basically lays the groundwork for looking into it, but it's just like transracialism, of where if you've opened Pandora's box if you look at other trans issues, where they want to keep the gender issue as purely fluid, but when you have fundamental aspects of your identity like your ethnicity or your species, oh no, that becomes really concrete.
Yeah, what if a man can become a woman, why can't this man become a cat?
Yeah. That's in Canada, they actually had other kin pronouns transcribed into the same law as Bill C-16. So if you're cat self or worm self, you can't be discriminated against.
Well, I mean, it's the same logic. How can they argue it?
Yeah, I want to slime myself up like a slug and not come into work today. That's going to be my excuse for Friday morning.
Well, I mean, you're legally protected.
So let's talk about how Graham sinned against the trans lobby, shall we? He didn't like slug people. Yeah. The co-creator of the hit comedy Father Ted has revealed how his outspoken stand on gender identity cost him work. Graham is 51, said he had not worn any new commissions in 2 years after he took up the fight against what he sees as a damaging gender ideology promoted by trans activists. Linehan said, "I think there's just a stink around me, the stink of bigotry, that has been deliberately created by radical trans rights activists. It has a chilling effect."
Now, he is right, but I mean, I'm not having a go, but you did do this with Count Dankula and everyone else by calling them fascists.
And this is my point, actually. It's the rope made for your own neck. This is the frustration I have with the TERFs that have now been folded into the right for some reason. You have all the mainstream networks on there, and J.K. Rowling on. I know you've done a sit-down interview with Posey Parker. She's very entertaining.
She's a lovely person.
But the radical feminist element of that label, you idiots created this problem back in 2014.
Well, Posey was actually like, I don't think I'm a feminist anymore.
Good.
So,
well done. She's further down the conversion road. But the people like Rowling who still cling to that feminist ideal, this gender bifurcation is the seed which germinated this monstrous fruit. If you wanted to separate sort of normative ethical prescriptions, a thick definition of woman, from womanhood, because you believe it's arbitrary in the patriarchy, if you take away the ethical part, then you set the ground for, we'll just deconstruct the biology part and wear it like a costume. So this is you lining yourself up for the guillotine.
No, that's exactly right. And then you also destroy all of those things that this is one of Posey Parker's prime complaints is, well, we want women's only spaces, female only spaces. And I, as a conservative, I'm like, you should have female only spaces because you don't want men being in places where women might undress. Yeah. Like, obviously.
I, as a misogynist, want to stay away from you, so please have your own spaces.
But I do think,
it's about protection.
Yeah, exactly. Women need this sort of social protection. And so this is how, I guess, the TERFs got folded into the right, because they all agree on what a woman is and that women and men should have space away from each other.
Yeah, it's not a change of position. It's left-wing cannibalism means you just aren't left enough. And my contention is I don't think we should become a refugee camp for those who weren't left enough for the left. But on the likes of Posey, well done for coming round.
She's doing a good job as well. She's winning the argument.
Yeah, so this article was a couple of years ago, and at the time, Linehan was actually quite self-aggrandizing in his defeat, which I didn't think was very helpful for his cause. He said, "I don't want to sound like I'm the leader of anything, but as a high-profile person in the establishment business, I think I helped get these women heard a lot more. Feminists all over the world are now looking to the UK as the place where the resistance to all this stuff started. I'd like to think I had something to do with that."
And and this is 2 years ago, yeah?
Yeah.
It's frustrating because 2 years ago, Graham Linehan was, like 3 years ago, Graham Linehan was calling me, Count Dankula, Paul Joseph Watson, just Nazis. And all we were doing is speaking out against exactly what he's speaking out against here.
Yeah.
Like, that's all it was.
Yeah, and what he was speaking out against specifically was, when I first got into this conversation, I would see young girls getting double mastectomies and hysterectomies, and I didn't think I'd have to talk about it that long. I thought others would see this as obviously wrong and step in. None of that happened. I've been left swinging in the wind by people I thought were my friends. I have to keep speaking out. But he doesn't have much of an opportunity to keep speaking out because he was promptly then banned from Twitter.
Oof. Yeah.
And that was the moment, it seems, that
he is on Getter now, though, isn't he?
Is he? Really?
Yep,
Okay.
He's Glinner on Getter now, so go follow him there.
Wonderful. Yes, if you're interested in him continually speaking out, which we agree with him very much on that issue. Apparently, it was for repeated violations of their hateful conduct policy, and one of the final straws that broke the camel's back was he made the obvious assertion that pansexuality is, quote, bollocks.
He's not wrong.
Yeah, because it doesn't exist if you don't abolish the gender binary. So one of the things he actually did, and obviously we don't have this yet because Dank hasn't uploaded I don't know if he's planning on uploading the roast VOD, but he actually made an appearance at the roast of Count Dankula because he did this. And this is what you're referring to. He actually said at the time about Dank's GoFundMe for his legal defense, "Hey, GoFundMe, are you guys aware of the details of this guy's case? He's using your site to cash in on hate speech and framing it as a joke."
And this was in what, 2018?
Scroll up a bit, Michael. I can't remember the exact year. Does it have it on there?
What's it? Yeah,
2018.
Yeah.
There we go. April 2018. After he was criticised for his stance, he said to one Twitter user, "Effing hell, he's supported by Tommy Robinson and InfoWars. His videos appear on the Daily Stormer. Why are you trying to participate in a conversation when you have no information? If you contributed to that fund, you're dumb." I can't say most of the swearing in here, but then that's what right-wing grifters depend on.
So just to say, this shows you the depth of his road to Damascus conversion here.
Yes.
Because his apology to Dankula was a video apology because he couldn't get there. But it was honestly really good.
Yeah, it was conciliatory.
It was genuinely sincere. And he said, look, and it genuinely demonstrated moral growth. He was like, look, I was in a place where I thought I was a heroic crusader, and it turns out that I was the villain. I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember exactly the words he used. Yeah. But, it turns out I was the villain and I was persecuting people based on lies. And so I'm really sorry, and I hope that I can be, we can have a better relationship in future, basically, something along those lines. And me and Connor were both there. It was really good. Yeah. And it was genuinely wholesome and heartwarming.
And the reason it's commendable is because we should be the place for forgiveness.
Yes.
Sincere forgiveness.
Yeah.
Yes, the turf part of the radical feminist part of the turf part is still a point of contention, but someone who genuinely has an awakening to this is an instrument that should not be wielded arbitrarily against people. Well done on coming round to that, and welcome to the fold of defending young girls from predators, basically. The fact that that's a political movement now says a lot about the fall of the West, but there we go. Yeah. So if we can go to the next one, just with he the other night did an interview with Dan Wootton on GB News, and specifically about the Tavistock clinic, because he actually had whistleblowers on the inside. He spoke to some of the whistleblowers. So he said after losing his marriage and that he felt vindicated by the Tavistock clinic closing. He said he befriended whistleblowers at the Tavistock clinic who were reporting homophobic parents taking their children to be transitioned. And he actually mentioned explicitly Lupron, which was the drug that was used to castrate paedophiles. It was mentioned in Matt Walsh's What is a Woman, and he said they were using it in there on prepubescent girls. Yeah. So, and the exact quote he used on the BBC, because the BBC in the next tab decided to throw him under the bus on Newsnight. This is where he became famous. He'd actually said in the Wootton interview, the BBC has been almost as negligent as it was to the level they were in the Savile years.
Yeah.
In reporting on this, in reporting in child abuse, I would have to agree. I just love, though, with this tweet from Newsnight, it's the sheer level of the police of vice and virtue of political correctness at the time. And for those who are listening in, it says, Father Ted creator Graham Linehan says his arguing about trans rights has made him the most hated man on the internet. On last night's programme, we challenged him on the way he conducted himself online.
Is that your job, is it, BBC Newsnight?
Scolding mother.
Yeah.
And we're paying for this. So, and during
the BBC.
Agreed. So during that interview, he had a sort of, you could see he was very agitated because he had a very small window of time in which to challenge it. He was talking about them saying, oh, the experimenting on people, that's not fair. And his leg was jigging. So it wasn't like he was being a malicious, hand-thumping dictator. Yeah. He was genuinely concerned about this thing and felt out of his depth.
He was nervous.
Yeah, and it turns out he was bang on the money. So well done for that. So if we look at his opposition, it just makes him look all the more glowing, I suppose, because Pink News hate him. They've done over 75 articles on the man at this point, so it's just this pathological obsession. It says, a lot of people have used the language, this was extract from the Newsnight article, a lot of people have used the language you've used, some of the dismissive terms that you've bandied about. They've actually increased the toxicity of this debate. It's turned into the term stochastic terrorism now. Have you seen that bandied around? Yeah, and it's where, if you say something rude and it has a statistical likelihood of inciting violence or someone killing themselves, like for example, if you say, something about gender ideology and then 42% of people decide to pick up a knife, then you're a terrorist.
Can be neither proved nor disproven.
Exactly.
Because they're speaking about potential statistics.
Yeah, it's non-falsifiable. So he says, Linehan says, yes, I can give, Smith said to Linehan, yes, I can give you several examples if you'd like. What about comparing people in the trans debate to speaking out against the Nazis? That's pretty extreme. Linehan said, there are a couple of parallels. One is that, at the moment, children are basically being experimented on with puberty blockers. One of the things that Tavistock whistleblowers reported was that homophobic parents were bringing their gender non-conforming kids in and telling them to fix them. There was a dark joke that went around the Tavistock that a couple of years there would be no gay people left. That's why I want to compare it to eugenics programs and things like that. It's extremely serious.
I mean, they probably actually used Lupron as well.
They did.
Yeah,
they genuinely did.
Right, there we go.
So how is that no different to...
How is that not a parallel, at least?
Well, to Alan Turing, for example, who was genuinely castrated for helping us defeat the Nazis, and then he was punished because homosexuality was a crime at the time. But it also reminds me of Jordan Peterson going on Kathy Newman's show and saying, you're comparing trans ideologues to Chairman Mao. And he said, the same ideology guides their utterances. And boy, did that take age well, didn't it?
Yeah.
Sadly, it aged very well. So then apparently the BBC were pelted with complaints. But one thing I did want to say about this is, if you think that going against Linehan and instead of going for pink news, for example, was good, this is the kind of thing that they're doing to gay people. So at the moment, they're insisting that monkeypox is, quote, not a gay disease, even though there was, I believe, an ABC News piece that said today almost the exact
98%.
opposite.
98% of people have it gay.
Yeah, so I'm just going to read out some stats from this piece where they seem to admit some sort of thing. This month, the UK Health Security Agency said queer men have been so far disproportionately affected, although officials are still trying to figure out why. There is no evidence that the virus is sexually transmitted, although it can be passed from close human contact, such as touching blood or bodily fluids, or prolonged exposure to respiratory droplets of an infected person. So sweat, blood, God, hate to think, or bodily fluids would pass it, but it's not sexually transmitted, sure. Infectious disease epidemiologist Mateo Prozacka told Pink News there is a huge risk of stigma emerging for being attached to the current patterns of transmission we're seeing for monkeypox, and that stigma will be directed at the infection of gay and bisexual men in general. Although almost exclusively a disease contracted by gay men, though, except for a child of a gay couple, and a dog with anal lesions owned by a gay couple in France, which I'm sure that there's nothing suspicious happening there.
Oh, God, you know what happened there.
Yeah, and they also cited in another article, which we don't have pulled up, but it was a New England Medical Journal, and they found that of the 528 monkeypox cases they looked at across 16 countries, 98% were either gay or bisexual men.
Yeah.
So why
probably
Pink News?
100% of them are orgy attenders.
Pea guzzlers, should we say it politely.
God.
So the problem is Pink News, by running interference for this, and I'm sorry you're going to have to look at this photo, they produce people like this with just such horrific suffering.
God.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, and I just thought this was so grotesque that it had to be seen, because this kind of permissiveness, this lifestyle, this running interference and saying, it's fine, you can go out, be as licentious and unsafe as possible. You produce people that have such awful suffering, their nose is rotting off. This was a German patient who had undiagnosed syphilis and AIDS. Undiagnosed, so he's contracting monkeypox at orgies and just spreading that around. And it had gotten to the point where his organs had failed, and the fact that HIV had accelerated so much was why his monkeypox was so bad, because he had no immune system. So Pink News and the likes are not only promoting lifestyles which lead to the infertility and osteoporosis of children, but also by running interference for genuine illnesses which affect people in this so-called community.
Yeah, they're hardly doing the community any favours.
No, they're literally killing people with this. So in turning around and saying, by criticising trans kids, you're going to lead them to suicide. All right, by not saying the realities of monkeypox, you're leading to gay men having their nose rot off.
Yeah.
You're disgusting. Just
it's vile. It's vile.
So there is a bit of a sour spot of milk in your tea, though.
Oh, yeah.
If we look at this, this is Josh's reporting on the Tavistock Centre, and we were quite celebratory at the time, and Josh did a great job talking about the
psychological studies. It sounded like a good thing, but I get the feeling that actually the boiler's popped, and now...
Pus is leaking,
to
use a monkeypox analogy. If we go to the next one, the Independent are actually reporting that Tavistock is being closed because it's too centralised.
God damn it.
So they're becoming satellite things.
So I knew.
It's worse because now it's going to be in multiple locations.
Yeah.
And so they're going to service more kids. And the framing of this is staggering. And,
service more kids with Lupron.
Yeah. To lop the breasts off a 16-year-old girl.
It's disgusting.
This is treasonous offence. The framing of this is awful as well. An interim report by Dr. Hilary Cass said that children and young people were being subjected to lengthy waits to access gender dysphoria services.
As if that's bad.
Yeah. So the fact that they aren't getting the treatment is why it was closed down. It was too slow. It wasn't the whistleblowers were successful. It's they want to trans the kids faster.
Conservative government, folks.
Yeah, exactly. The report issued said a fundamentally different service model can provide timely and appropriate care for children and recommended that the NHS launch local specialist centres. In response, NHS England said that it is in contact with Tavistock and it would be brought to a close and that 2 centres would be established by children's specialist hospitals in London and the North West. These will be in place by spring 2023. Further reach. More affordable, more kids.
Conservative government.
Yeah. So this is utterly evil. And so hopefully Linehan keeps up his pressure and gets more people on side.
Yeah.
And I thought I'd finish with something utterly ridiculous. Also in the comedy sphere, also in the trans sphere. You're going to enjoy this. Eddie Izzard takes inspiration from Vladimir Zelensky as a comic that became a politician in her fresh bid to become an MP and, buried in this article, eventually challenged Keir Starmer to be Prime Minister. I'm not joking, and I wish I was. So look at stunning and brave Izzard, who, if you look at this photo, what do you see?
You're going to find this hard to believe, folks, right? But when I was young, 25 years ago, Eddie Izzard was cool. But you're not going to believe it looking at that photo.
Yeah.
But Eddie Izzard was a very funny and slightly cross-dressy man because it was provocative, it was edgy and interesting and funny, and it was a laugh at himself in which he would couch his jokes.
Yeah, it didn't have a political dimension.
Yeah, now he's become my nan.
Well, he looks like Roz from Monsters, Inc.
Yeah, yeah.
Always watching Wazowski. So the
Prime Minister Izzard.
Yeah, the trans comedian wants to emulate Ukrainian wartime President Vladimir Zelensky as a comic who went on to become a good leader in their bid to run the Labour MP in Sheffield next election. I would love to be elected and I would love to fight for Keir Starmer to be the next Prime Minister and then eventually take over. Wonderful. For those complaining at us using male pronouns as well, if you refer to Eddie Izzard in the wrong pronoun, because God forbid your eyes couldn't tell you otherwise. Izzard said similar designs to reinvent himself or herself as a serious character, having switched pronouns for he, him to she, her last year. He said, I prefer she, her, but I don't mind he, him. So at least he's all right with slip-ups.
I guess so. But
so when he's confronting the G7 and being stared down by
he's going to be sat across from
Trump
Vladimir
Jr.
Putin like that.
Yeah.
And Putin's going to have a hard time not laughing.
Yeah. His toxic masculinity will feel really challenged.
Yeah.
So yes, it's vital we keep up the pressure, even if it comes from comedians. Well done for Graham for recanting his testimony, but clearly we have a lot of trans madness to have an uphill struggle against. If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go over to lotuseaters.com to become a premium member on our website, where you'll get all sorts of exclusive content, such as Josh and Carl going through the life and crimes of the notorious Hunter Biden. If you'd like to follow Carl on Getter to see all the content he's putting out, you can go to @CarlBenjamin on Getter. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.